This is the second Thresholder Talk of the year. We have Dr. Keenan Adams here with us today. He is a leader in public lands conservation and sustainable tourism with over 20 years of experience in habitat restoration, sustainable development, and community engagement. Keenan has dedicated his career to creating lasting positive change. He currently serves as the forest supervisor of Yunque National Forest in Puerto Rico and is the CEO of Agro, Bosque and Clouds Glamping, where he's working to regenerate ecosystems and address food sovereignty and poverty. Part of his contributions have earned him multiple awards, including Alumni of the Year, honors from Furman and Clemson University. And I must say that he took advantage of a football scholarship, right, to access education and to ultimately earn his PhD degree in forestry and wildlife biology from Clemson University. So with that, please join me welcoming Dr. Keenan Adams. So welcome, Keenan.
Well, thank you very much for such a kind introduction. It's always weird to hear those nice things said about you. But it's an honor to be here. Looking forward to talking to folks. I've done a little bit of background checking on the organization. What a cool mission. And so if I can be of any inspiration as you're seeking to really help nonprofits with tech and solving complex challenges, it's an honor. So I hope you leave with something. I have some slides. Probably won't get through them all because I really would much rather have a conversation. Okay, so who am I? She just went through this very nice background on me, but what I would say is when I was in college, I read this book by Malcolm Gladwell that really talked about the tipping point, which talked about the connectors. And it was this really cool story about Joanne Gant's clooning. Does anybody know who she is? So this lady in the 60s and 70s went into the inner city, and they realized that these African-American population was falling behind because of early childhood development. They weren't getting the same level of exposure to these things, and immediately put this population behind the bar. And so they said, we got to come up with an innovative way to engage these folks. And she came up with this idea called Sesame Street. And now you may take it for granted when you see Coco Melon and all these other early childhood development shows. But back then that was a novel concept. And I was really fascinated. I said, how did this white lady go into the hood after the civil rights movement and make this epic change with all these early childhood psychologists, all these nurses, people that had no point being there? And when somebody asked her, how did you get this work done? She said, through relationships. And that always stuck with me. And that, to me, I said, I want to be that person. I want to be the one that can help make change through relationships. And so I really apply these concepts of constellation governance, where I'm trying to bring people together, multiple sectors, and also adaptive leadership, which we may get into a little bit. But why am I in this space? So this is me when I was a little kid in Section 8 housing. And that's the creek I grew up in. And I was enamored with playing in the creek, catching crawfish. I remember one time we caught a bunch of crawfish. I'm not sure what they're called in Spanish. But they're little small lobsters. And looks like lobsters. And we ended up catching a bunch, and we ended up calling Red Lobster, trying to sell it to them. Right. And that's the type of just fun we had as a kid. And I'm not sure if anybody remembers Captain Planet. But that, I'm of the age of Captain Planet, where we have to save the world. And I also grew up with WGN. I'm not sure if that was actually a TV show here, but in the States, there was a Chicago channel because Michael Jordan was playing. They would cover every Bulls game. And my brother would watch that consistently. But whenever it was Shark Week, my parents were like, no WGN, no Chicago Bulls. This is Keenan's week, because I was just fascinated with sharks. And it really helped me transition from loving nature to making it my profession. Very lucky. I know a lot of people don't, work in the thing that they truly love. And so I feel very, very blessed to be in a situation. How did I get to Puerto Rico? So that's me. That suitcase is not pink. That's red. It just looks pink. People always comment on that, but that's me with everything I can put on myself. Heading to to Puerto Rico right after Hurricane Maria. I was the designated. I'm comfortable enough to walk around with the pink suitcase. Be that as it may, that's red. The White House designated me as the person to lead recovery for natural and cultural resources. And my connection to the island is my wife is from Corozal. And so mis suegros, mis cuñados, everybody was here. And I wanted to do something to help. I'm also, as she mentioned, I'm a federal executive. And then also, I purchased a farm in Ciales, Puerto Rico for a weekend getaway, but we pivoted after meeting the community and understanding them. But why are we talking today? I know some of you here, but I kind of want you to leave informed them. So then some of the challenges we have in Puerto Rico, I want you to leave inspired, centered on your purpose. I just shared kind of my passions and how it got me here and how I leveraged that. And your purpose in compounding, staying hyper focused. I know you guys are, again, have such a cool mission. And so my challenge to you is, given what I talk about today, how can you apply that in your job tomorrow and in the coming weeks, about getting centered, finding your purpose, building relationships with those clients, developing trust. So one thing I want to talk about is, after Maria, I always came to Puerto Rico before Maria and said, man, this place could be Costa Rica. It just, in terms of tourism, it just needs to do a few things because everything was so hard. Things weren't on Google. The infrastructure wasn't integrated. There were so many cool things to do, but you were never oriented as a visitor. So one of the things I did was I worked with MIT and Harvard after Maria to develop this study, which was like, what are the alternative sectors that we can really focus on in Puerto Rico to leverage all this hurricane money that's coming in and all this environmental restoration? How can we actually leverage it? And we came up with these 5 sectors, eco, gastro, adventure, agro-tourism. And then we did a spatial analysis. I'm not sure if you guys are familiar with GIS, but essentially you layer all these things on top of each other to try to identify where are these key hubs. And one thing we really would also talk to boots on the ground, and these key findings was we got to focus on human capital development. That's a lot of the reasons why Puerto Rico was not leveraging all the potential it could for tourism. Infrastructure, I think anybody who's been here understands that's a challenge in the tropics. But also stakeholder engagement and planning in the planning process, because a lot of times decisions are made in a vacuum and then forced on the people. And so these are our key findings. And I know some of you probably work on reports, you give it to the client, and they may not do anything with it immediately. And that for me is super frustrating. And so I remember turning this thing into the tourism company. Like, here you go. Look at this amazing MIT Harvard analysis, and nothing happened. I was like, geez. But then, is this recognizable to you? Adventure, cultural, agro. They actually integrated it into their the tourism company. And so I share this to say that sometimes I'm not known to be a patient person, but sometimes you just have to be patient, and you're going to be working on stuff for clients. They may not necessarily adopt it, but it's really about planting seeds and giving them good information, because at the end of the day, they still have to do the hard work to figure it out and do the work. So anyway, I just share that to say that it sometimes things are delayed. Now, I am sure you guys maybe or may not have seen this, but destination marketing organizations have a perverse incentive. So a lot of Discover Puerto Rico, they want to keep adding more and more and more tourists. And I remember hearing authors say this is tourists simply won't go to a city that has lost its soul. And what happens is you have this discovery of a destination or a place within a destination. Think about La Placita, how it was 10 years ago versus how it is now, Old San Juan. And then you come to this inflection point at stage 5, stage 6, where you have to make these tough decisions. And I would say Puerto Rico is right in this range of consolidated capacity. And we really have to think about, well, what are we going to do? Because you can see at stage 6, there are different paths. And so that's something that we really need to think about as a destination. And that's why I'm very interested in this challenge. I talk about regenerative tourism. I'm not going to read to you all those elements, but those are really important elements of regenerative tourism. But the whole concept is that if you do tourism, you're extracting, you're leaving things in the worst condition. Sustainable tourism is like where things are constant. So You're neither taking nor giving. Like what you're doing is neutral. Regenerative is the whole idea, is that we're leaving things in a better place. We're actually leveraging tourism to impact the social well-being of people. There's a big difference between economic growth and economic development, right? We can have economic growth, but if the livelihoods of the people across all types of different parts of their lives, health, education, infrastructure, etc., well-being, if that's not getting better, well, then you got economic growth without economic development. The whole idea is that people's lives get better with the increase of economic activity. Now, I want to talk about this more is better concept, because a lot of people think more is better. More tourists. We just need more tourists. This is from Charco Frio from 2019 on the left and 2022. Well, what happened during 2020, right? We got cheap plane tickets and COVID checks, and things went ham here, right? You can see this from space, this damage of impact. And it may not look like much, but that's what it looks like. You're not supposed to be able to see the roots of the trees. People aren't supposed to be fitting inside these huge caverns of soil. The topsoil is well above her head. This is the level of erosion that's occurring because of over-tourism. Those rocks that you're seeing now should not be red. This is the Rio Fajardo, which goes into the Fajardo watershed, which goes out to the very key NOAA coral reef system outside of Fajardo. And so all this sediment is making its way downhill, right? It should be clear. Now let's talk about the model economically. So immediately when you book an Airbnb experience, 20% is gone because they're taking that as a booking platform. And then maybe only like 5 companies are doing 80% of the volume. So it's not like this thing is evenly distributed. Some companies are just almost monopolizing that. So there's only 5 companies that are really benefiting. And what happens is you meet, this is in Condado by the Supermax. You meet a tour guide that likely doesn't have a license to transport people. And they end up going to this place in Charco Frio that calls the Visitor Center of Charco Frio. But this is what we're exposing. We're showing to people this is Puerto Rico, when in fact it's not, right? But this is the impression we may be giving people. And then you go through this overcrowded situation, and you can read the headlines, but last weekend somebody died there. Those is mortality it's a big issue, right? We don't have the infrastructure to manage the trails, the visitation, the rescate, all of that. But we want more and more and more and more and more and more. And so the question I ask is this what we want, right? So you think about it, a metro-based company in San Juan sells a trip for $80. And say they get 25 people in that van. So that's $2,000 of revenue that a San Juan company gets. Airbnb takes 400 of it. So just in Evu, San Juan is getting $220 in Evu on the 11%. Ceiba is only getting $1 because they're paying $10 in parking. So a San Juan company is extracting the value from Ceiba, right? And Ceiba is only getting $1.1 because the person that's paying for parking, they're paying that 11%. They're getting a low quality experience. The environment's being damaged. The community's well-being is affected. And the only little bit of money is being spent here is for parking. And cruise ships are encouraging this type of use versus going to the National Forest, because the National Forest in Rio Grande may be a little more expensive for the outfitter. And this is called the invisible burden. And so you can think about energy and greenhouse gas emission of tourism, right? So how much does it cost for the water upgrade? If you think about Culebra, they don't have enough sewage treatment for the surge of tourists, right? Their sewage system isn't big enough. I think solid waste, I think we're all aware of the challenges. We barely have any compliant landfill sewage. All these key infrastructure things get stressed the more and more people that you have. I mean, you heard about the gentrification and the increased housing costs. If you look at Culebra, Old San Juan, Ocean Park, Calle Luisa, think about how affordable that is now compared to it was 10 years ago. I took this on the way to my farm. That's a septic system overflowing at a Chinchorro, going down into the river, right? 50% of homes in Puerto Rico have informal construction, and 60% of homes rely on septic systems, and most of those are non-compliant. Anyway, I talk about this. There's been felony charges, but this is a huge issue, and the more and more people we add, the more impactful it's going to be to the environment. So I want to have some time for reflection. And I'm not able to see one, but for you all, I really want to have a conversation. What's Puerto Rico's path forward? Are we at a threshold? Can you see the questions?
We can. Yes. Yes.
Okay. Just want to curious to open this up for conversation a bit of, are we at a threshold moment with this? How can we leverage nonprofit space? How do you guys feel about it? There's a lot of, Bad Bunny's mini documentary that was just released that was really on the nose about some of these issues. So anyway, I just want to open up the space, hear what you guys think.
You hear me? Woohoo.
See. Yeah.
Gracias.
Yes.
First of all, thank you so much for the presentation. It's very shocking. I got to tell you, right? I feel like these are things that I know and I've experienced because I lived pretty much my entire life here, almost. But I'm wonder, you being from the States, coming down here to Puerto Rico, doing what you're doing, how do you see the action of the government here in the island when it comes to these topics? I guess that's question number one. Number two, what do you think is the biggest challenge when it comes to addressing these topics, maybe from a Puerto Rican perspective? Is it lack of understanding what's going on, lack of funding resources? Got to be, one of the top three, of course, the funding part. But what would you say are the major contributors to these different things from the cultural perspective, I guess?
So I'm just going to be candid. There's plenty of money. There's records amount of money every year. Money's not the problem. The problem is, and you're seeing it play out right now with Discover Puerto Rico, and Brad Dean just left, is that in the past, a lot of the money was used in past to, it's almost like a slush fund to pass out to marketing companies and newspaper companies. And when that changed, it really bothered a lot of people. There's a narrative created about privatization, which is, we could get into that. That's a hot topic here. A lot of people are still mad about the phone company and, Luma, that's a hot topic here. And they try to wrap it in that. But the issue is, the money is going to, also say nepotism, which is a challenge in Puerto Rico. Not just family, but friends and family. The second one is the money goes into a development fund. So the tourism incentives, there's been billions and billions of dollars put into developing tourism assets, but there's only a 3.2% ROI on that. We were better off putting the money in the market and then passing that money out. It's costing us like $236,000 or $270,000 per room added through this program. And so I just think there's a lot of entrenchment of people benefiting from it. What we need is destination management. We need to start getting all these people together and saying, El Yunque resorts, how do we, and this is not common to Puerto Rico. This is common to every destination, because you think about it, you have to drive on the road, which involves DTOP. You have aqueductos, which is providing water. You got PREPA, which is providing, or Luma providing power. You got three different entities that have to coordinate their projects just for one area. That's very difficult to do. And so the big issue is governance. And we have to try to think about creating governance structures to have cross industry collaboration. I'm going to be agnostic on the local government, because I really want to believe, I believe in the sovereignty of Puerto Rico, and I don't want to be criticizing or making statements about the local government. So I'll defer on that question, but hopefully it gives some insights on my thought.
Absolutely. And again, I want to thank you for what you're presenting and what you're trying to do for Puerto Rico as well. Very, very helpful. I have one final question, but I'll leave it at the end because I think it's going to be fun. But anyway.
Thank you, Juan. Keenan, could you stop sharing your screen so we can see you when you're answering the questions, por favor?
I can start sharing again. Sorry.
Yeah, no, I put the picture of the questions in the chat for everyone.
Okay, perfect.
But Jess, I know you have a question, so go ahead.
Yeah, I have a question, and I think you teed me up well for it there, actually. I'm not from Puerto Rico. I'm from Montana originally, and I live in Maine now, but I have a big background I worked for the National Forest Foundation for years. In fact,
oh, wow.
I recall you doing a guided walk for National Forest Week in maybe 2020 throughout UK. Which was great. And I worked for Trout Unlimited before that. So, conservation nonprofit background. and worked a lot in the private-public partnership area, and particularly around like recreation access. When I worked for Trout Unlimited, we did a lot of work with public-private partnership to invest funds in restoration efforts. And I was kind of wondering, like, you started to talk about that a bit, like what kind of structures you see in place or structures that are needed to make that work for Puerto Rico with that big influx of tourist funds. How do you create that public-private partnership to really effectively? I don't know if I'm getting at a really solid question, but that's what I'm wondering about in Puerto Rico's perspective, you know. Yeah.
I think first we have to decide about, do we want more tourism or do we want higher value tourism? You know, do we want fewer people that are paying more and then you're not creating as much stress? I think that's the typical direction. But I think you can see a lot in the discourse, especially with the younger folks, like they're kind of not comfortable with the direction things are going. And I really think that is something as a society needs to be reconciled first before you can really talk about a path forward. The one common theme I do hear is about we just want infrastructure maintained better. It's really easy to get money to build something new. It's really hard to maintain it. And there's all these fits and starts, like we worked on fixing the balneario in Luquillo, but then couldn't be maintained. And we did all this money fixing it, but yeah. It's a real challenge, especially when like 43% of the population is in poverty, right? And, you know, they got other Maslow hierarchy of needs to worry about. And so it's, you know, if you're sitting in a very high affluent society like Denmark and social well-being is good, you can have these societal conversations when people are just trying to figure out how to pay for their medicine. It's just a different ballgame. And it has to be considered.
Do you find a lot of buy-in from like maybe the more like wealthier landowners who may have an interest in conservation, or you had greenwashing on your slide? So like really engaged tourist companies who, you know, is that much of a construct now, or is it more, I don't know, where you're getting investment from people who can afford to make the investment?
We've engaged, I had it on one of the slides. We've gotten like voluntary surcharges from the resorts to help fund our fringe group. We're starting to move there. Nobody's really ever asked or pushed. And so that's what we're trying to do, is push the envelope and get the private industry more involved. Because they're benefiting from El Yunque, right? They're benefiting from the asset being there. Well, how can you start paying for the benefit that you're getting in a way that doesn't hurt your bottom line? Yeah.
Thank you.
Got a few more slides if you want me to finish, or we can keep having a conversation.
Absolutely.
We have.
Absolutely.
Yeah.
Pero,
I see
Carmen, if you want.
Yeah.
Just to be quick.
Either way. Go ahead and I'll take it to the end.
Always hard when you...
Maybe I'll ask my question while you pull it up.
I got it.
There you go.
I'll skip the leadership part. But yeah, here's some of the stuff we've been, you know, listed on Time Magazine for the work we're doing. We're worked with Ocean Lab on them creating El Yunque beer so we can do watershed restoration, working on a trail. So there's a lot of cool stuff that we have going on in the background. But this is what I want to talk about. So these are the Montes family, and it just really struck me when I saw this video. It's from my Nest camera, and this is 2 generations of people that my neighbors. These are mis vecinos, and it hit me as like, well, his grandfather worked here too. And their livelihood hasn't changed. They're still living in the same conditions. And originally we bought this land to build a nice Cuatro Aguas, like a small little cabin, and just have a weekend getaway. And we said, let's take that money and do a farm. Because we talked with the people and they said, oh, we used to grow coffee here. Can we start doing farming so we can help ourselves, and maybe we can do an Airbnb so we can, you know, create some jobs from that. And so that's one of the challenges that I really wanted to work on. And I realized that Puerto Rico lost 42% of our farms since 2012, and they've been degraded. You know, Puerto Rico has been colonized for 500 years, right? And so the land has been really stressed. We import 80 to 90% of our food, and 43% of the population lives in poverty. So it's like, okay, how can we address this integrated problem? And this is how. So this is me when I first started planting trees. And that's what it looks like in just a year and a half. And so what we're doing is this practice called regenerative farming to really help restore the land and create a forest back, but also create food. And so we're using pana, plátano, cacao, these newer cash crops that we're focusing on. And we're using, as I mentioned, this regenerative model, which really focuses on biodiversity, quality crop yields versus quantity, paying fair wage jobs. And we've gotten over 200,000 in government funding and incentives. And we've been globally recognized for the work that we've been doing. And this is a group of volunteers that came to work, and we're planting cacao that morning. And so I want to say, and as I end with this, is that I found purpose in disruption and chaos. And disruption reveals, that's my little nugget, Paola. She's a lot bigger now. She's 6 years old. But, the disruption reveals opportunity. And they create these moments where you can make a difference. Embrace the unknown. You guys are working with a lot of uncertain and complex problems. And what a great opportunity, right? And you're going to grow when you're in this uncomfortable state. Purpose drives your resilience. What motivates you? And how does that align with and your role matters, and change is inevitable, but the purpose, it transforms, and finding your why and leading with it, so you can continue to play the game. So anyway, I'll stop with that so we can continue to have a conversation.
Yeah. I think that's very inspiring. Love how your farm is looking. You should probably do a carbon credits program. Looking for programs in Puerto Rico. There are not that many.
No.
I was going to comment a few slides back. I mean, it really resonated that the fact when you're saying maybe more tourists is not better. You feel it when you're here, because we feel that all the places you visited are just full, and it, but it's hard when you put it in numbers. It just makes it really clear. And I'm wondering, you also mentioned Bad Bunny somewhere in the beginning. He's doing a residence here. We're expecting a lot more tourists or a lot more influx coming from that. And I definitely appreciate the gesture that he's doing. So I think it's something that's never been done before. But I'm wondering if you guys or if the industry is preparing for that, or do you think that's going to cause a lot more harm? It resonated with me, the Airbnbs, when you saw the septic tanks and all that flowing. I have friends who are going through that. There are residences that are just packed with people. They're meant to hold a family, and now they're packed with visitors, and the septic tanks just can't hold it, and they're just affecting the neighborhoods and the residences. So I'm just wondering, any thoughts on that?
So thankfully, the residency is typically in a low season of tourism, so it's not like that it's occurring during the winter or spring break. So we typically have much lower visitation in August and September because of hurricane season. So I personally am not as concerned. I think it's great. That's what we want to do, right? Remember COVID, we wanted to flatten the curve. We want to flatten the tourism curve. We're better off having more consistent tourism over time than these huge spikes. That's where we get overwhelmed and over tourism. And so it's great. It's kind of flattening the tourism curve. Tourism can't be solved. It has to just be managed. That's what I say. You guys deal with complexity all the time, right? Complicated, you can solve it. Doing a mortgage is complicated, but getting someone that just had a heart attack to change their diet, well, that's complex. There's all these layers to it, right? And so you manage it. You don't solve it.
Great. That makes sense.
We just got to manage it, do things, try things, evaluate it, try something different.
Who else has a question then?
It's my turn. Hey, Keenan, thank you so much for being here. I hope we get to walk in forest together someday. And
let me know.
Love to learn from you. The question I have is where, for those of us that either are in Puerto Rico or travel here from time to time, where are the places, maybe your 2 or 3 favorites that we can go to, that we should go to when we want to get outside and get out with the trees and the crayfish and stuff like that? Is there anything that's on your list?
Yeah, I think the prettiest. So my favorite parts of El Yunque are the places nobody go. El Sabana and Naguabo. I think it's the southern entrance of El Yunque. It's just beautiful. 186 in Canóvanas, Rio Grande. Probably the prettiest drive in Puerto Rico. In terms of, I would just say that El Centro Cordero, like Auto, man, what a beautiful landscape. And there's some good state parks there, or other trails as well. But I think the easy thing to do is always just look up charcos and trails on the there's an app called All Trails that you can download, and also just Google Maps chart.
We did a couple weekends ago. We did, right, Lena?
Yeah.
And then I forget the other cueva that's after that, but that was an amazing walk. Pretty good walk to 45
There's
minutes.
so many cool places. So many cool places. And, we have to put the infrastructure in first, because then otherwise you can turn it into some Instagram spot that then loses its character. But, that's something that we really need to think about, is how can we put in the right infrastructure so people can experience all these cool.
Thank you for that.
Oh, thank you.
One last question.
Yes, I just want to have a little bit of fun here. But Keenan, since you have a good relationship with El Yunque, and you already mentioned it, there might be some folks in this call that may not have some issues finding good parking spot in El Yunque. So I'm wondering if you have any particular advice for them, and especially, paying your tickets, right? If you got one.
So, get there early. We had the reservation system because we just couldn't handle, the Puerto Rican police weren't showing up to help us. And I said, okay, well, we have to manage it ourselves. And it would cost us about $700,000 to manage it. Like, when you go to a concert and people are parking you, that costs us about $700,000 a year to do that. And I said, okay, that's not affordable. So we just did a reservation system, and finally the police showed up. But with the police showing up, now there's more parking tickets. So the good news is they're funding UPR. UPR is in a budget.
And Keenan, to be clear, the issue was more around getting a parking ticket on a rental car, right? And then how do we go about paying for it? And sounds like, I don't know, almost 2 years from now, and hasn't been completed, that paying process. But anyway.
Be calm. You'll get a charge sooner or later.
You heard that, Alina?
Joy. Thanks for snitching.
Keenan, thank you so much.